You walk into the kitchen and stand there for a second, blinking, because you cannot remember why you came in. You are talking to a good friend and their name just slips away right when you need it most. Maybe you have started leaving sticky notes on the fridge or double-checking that you locked the front door, not because you are careless, but because your mind feels a little slower than it used to. If any of that sounds familiar, I want you to know something important right away. This is common. It is not a sign that your best years are behind you and there is real, practical, science-backed action you can take starting today. Because here is the question everyone over 60 is quietly asking themselves. Out of everything we hear about brain health, walking, puzzles, reading, eating better, staying social, which one actually matters the most? Which single habit gives your brain the biggest boost? Stick with me, because by the end of this video you will know the answer and it might surprise you. It is not the one most people assume. Let's talk for a moment about why this question matters so much once we pass 60. Your brain, believe it or not, is still capable of growing new connections between cells well into your 70s, 80s, and beyond. Researchers call this neuroplasticity, and it simply means your brain can reorganize itself, build new pathways, and strengthen old ones, no matter your age. That is genuinely encouraging news because for decades people believed the brain was fixed after a certain age, like a machine that just wears down. We now know that is not the full story. What determines whether your brain keeps adapting well is not luck, and it is not just genetics either. It largely comes down to how you use it, move it, feed it, and rest it day after day. So the goal of this video is not to scare you with what could go wrong. It is to hand you a clear roadmap of what tends to go right, based on what researchers who study aging brains keep discovering. Now, let me introduce you to someone I think you will relate to. Let's call her Carol. Carol is 67, retired from a long career as a school administrator, and a few years ago she started noticing the same little slips so many of us notice. Misplacing her glasses, forgetting a grandchild's birthday until the day itself. She told her daughter she felt like her brain had a fog over it some mornings. Instead of panicking, Carol got curious. She started paying attention to which days her mind felt sharp and which days it felt foggy. And she noticed something interesting. The sharp days were not random. They followed a pattern. I am going to walk you through exactly what that pattern was, because it lines up almost perfectly with what brain researchers have been telling us for years. But first, I want to clear up a myth that trips up so many well-meaning people, because if you believe this myth, you could be spending your time and energy on something that helps only a little, when something else could help so much more. Here is the myth. Doing crossword puzzles or Sudoku every single day is the best thing you can do for your aging brain. I know that might sting a little if you love your daily puzzle, and to be fair, puzzles are not bad. They keep you engaged, they are enjoyable, and enjoyment matters for its own sake. But here is the honest truth that research keeps pointing toward. Repeating the same familiar puzzle, the same crossword style, the same Sudoku grid, mostly makes you better at that one specific puzzle. It does not necessarily translate into a sharper, more resilient brain across the board. Your brain, much like your muscles, adapts to whatever specific demand you place on it. If you only ever lift the same light weight, your body gets efficient at that one movement, but it does not build overall strength. The same idea applies to your mind. So if puzzles alone are not the biggest brain booster, what is? I promise I am getting there. But first, let's talk about something you might not expect to hear on a brain health video at all. And that is your feet. Yes, your feet, and more specifically, how often they carry you somewhere. Physical movement, especially the kind that gets your heart pumping a little faster, is one of the most consistently supported habits for brain health that researchers have studied. When you move your body, especially with brisk walking, swimming, dancing, or cycling, your heart sends more oxygen-rich blood to your brain. That extra blood flow feeds the very tissue responsible for memory, focus, and decision-making. Experts who study aging often point to the hippocampus, the part of your brain closely tied to memory formation, as an area that seems to benefit from regular movement. Some research even suggests that people who stay physically active tend to show less shrinkage in this memory-related region over time, compared to those who stay mostly sedentary. That is a big deal, because memory is often the very thing people fear losing most as they age. But here is where it gets interesting, and here is that curiosity gap I promised you. Movement alone done the exact same way every day, on a treadmill staring at the same wall, going through the motions without much mental engagement, does help your brain, but it is not the full picture either. There is something else, a second ingredient, that when combined with movement seems to create a much more powerful effect on the aging brain. Carol discovered this by accident, and once you hear what it was, you will probably recognize it from your own life too. I'm going to reveal exactly what that second ingredient is, and how to combine it with movement in a simple daily habit. But let's pause here for a second and talk about why this combination matters so much for people specifically in their 60s, 70s, and beyond. Because the stakes are a little different for us than they were in our 30s. When we were younger, our brains had a certain built-in resilience, extra reserve capacity, you might say, that could absorb a stressful week, a poor night's sleep, or a stretch of inactivity without much noticeable effect. As we get older, that reserve tends to shrink a bit, which means daily habits start to matter more, not less. The good news hiding inside that fact is this: because habits matter more now, small, consistent changes can produce noticeably real improvements in how sharp, clear, and present you feel day to day. You are not fighting an uphill battle against time. You are simply learning which small deposits into your brain's daily account pay off the most. And that brings us right back to Carol, and the second ingredient that, when paired with movement, seemed to turn her foggy mornings into clear ones more often than not. Stay with me, because in the next part I am going to break down exactly what that ingredient is, why it works, and how you can start using it this very week, along with a couple of surprising habits involving sleep and social connection that most people never even think of as brain health tools at all. So let's get back to Carol, and the pattern she noticed in her own foggy mornings versus her clear ones. On her clear days, she had usually done two things. She had gone for a walk, and she had talked with someone. Really talked. Not just a quick hello, but an actual conversation. Whether it was her daughter on the phone, a neighbor over the fence, or a friend at her weekly book club. On her foggy days, she had mostly stayed inside, alone, scrolling through her phone or watching television for long stretches. When she pieced this together, she assumed it was just a coincidence. It was not. Social connection turns out to be one of the most underrated and most powerful contributors to a sharp aging brain, and here is why it works the way it does. When you have a real conversation with another person, your brain is doing an enormous amount of work all at once. You are listening, interpreting tone, recalling shared history, forming responses, reading facial expressions, and managing the back-and-forth timing of speech. That is a full-body mental workout involving memory, language processing, emotional regulation, and quick thinking, all happening together in real time. Researchers who study aging and cognitive health have repeatedly found that people who maintain strong social ties and regular, meaningful interaction tend to experience less cognitive decline over time compared to those who experience chronic loneliness or isolation. Loneliness, on the other hand, has been linked in various studies to higher stress hormone levels and increased inflammation, both of which are not friendly to brain tissue over the long run. This is not about needing a huge social circle either. Experts generally point to quality over quantity. One or two close, honest relationships where you can be yourself seem to matter far more than a long list of acquaintances. Now here is the curiosity gap I want to open for you. Movement matters, social connection matters, but researchers who have looked closely at which activities produce the single biggest, most measurable boosts in brain function keep landing on one particular category of activity that combines multiple brain systems at once. And it is probably not what you are picturing. It is not walking alone. It is not talking alone. It is learning something entirely new, something your brain has never done before, and ideally, something that involves your body, your senses, and other people all at the same time. Let me explain why this specific type of activity appears to outperform almost everything else. And then I will give you real, simple examples you can start this week without spending much money or leaving your comfort zone too far. Your brain thrives on novelty. When you do something completely new to you, your brain cannot rely on old automatic pathways. It has to build brand new connections to figure out this unfamiliar task. This is where the real growth happens. Think about it this way. If you have been driving the same route to the grocery store for 15 years, your brain barely has to think about it anymore. It is on autopilot. But if you decide to learn a new skill, say a new dance style, a musical instrument, a new language, or even a new craft like pottery or painting, your brain has to actively problem solve, coordinate movement, sometimes read new information, and adjust in real time when you make a mistake. This is exactly the kind of challenge that neuroplasticity research suggests helps build cognitive reserve. essentially a kind of backup capacity in your brain that some scientists believe may help buffer against age-related decline. This is why activities like dance classes tend to show up so favorably in aging and brain health research. Think about what dancing actually demands of you. You are moving your body, which brings that helpful blood flow we talked about earlier. You are learning new steps and sequences, which challenges memory and coordination. You are often doing it with a partner or in a group, which brings in that powerful social element. And you are usually doing it to music, which engages yet another set of brain regions tied to rhythm, timing, and emotion. It is essentially an all-in-one brain workout, hitting movement, learning, memory, and connection simultaneously. That is very likely part of why some studies on aging populations have found dance associated with notably positive outcomes for cognitive function compared to more repetitive forms of exercise alone. But please do not worry if dancing is not for you, because the same principle applies to plenty of other activities. Learning a new language, even just a little bit through an app or a weekly class, forces your brain to build new vocabulary pathways, practice pronunciation, and often engage with a teacher or study partner. Playing a musical instrument for the first time, even something as simple as learning a few chords on a guitar or notes on a keyboard, requires coordination between your hands, your eyes, your ears, and your memory all at once. Taking up a new hobby with your hands, like woodworking, gardening with new techniques, knitting a pattern you have never tried, or cooking cuisines you have never made before, all push your brain into that valuable zone of novelty and problem solving. The common thread in all of these is simple, new, a little bit challenging, and ideally shared with someone else when possible. I want to pause here and open one more loop, because there is a habit hiding underneath all of this that most people completely overlook. And honestly, it might matter more than anything we have discussed so far. It has nothing to do with an activity you do during the day at all. It happens at night while you are asleep. And if you are not getting enough good quality rest, it could be quietly undoing a lot of the good work you are doing during your waking hours. I'm going to explain exactly what happens in your brain while you sleep, why it matters so much more after 60 than it did in your younger years, and the specific, practical adjustments that sleep researchers commonly recommend for better rest. Then, in the final part of this video, I will pull everything together into one simple, realistic daily approach you can start using immediately, along with a few words about nutrition that support everything we have covered, all without needing any complicated diet plan or expensive supplements. Let's talk about sleep, because this is the piece so many people skip right over, and it might be one of the most important pieces of the whole puzzle. While you sleep, your brain is not simply shutting down and resting quietly. It is doing active, important work. During deep sleep stages, your brain appears to go through a kind of cleaning process, where waste products that build up during the day, including a protein called beta amyloid that has been studied extensively in relation to brain aging, get cleared out more efficiently. Sleep is also when your brain seems to consolidate memories, essentially filing away what you learned or experienced during the day into longer-term storage. This means that if you spent your afternoon learning a new skill, going for a walk and having a wonderful conversation with a friend, but then only slept 4 or 5 broken hours that night, you may not get the full benefit of everything you did during the day. The learning, the connections, the good habits, they all need quality rest to properly settle in. Sleep researchers who study older adults commonly point to a few practical habits that tend to support better rest. Keeping a consistent sleep and wake time, even on weekends, helps regulate your body's internal clock. Getting natural sunlight exposure in the morning, even just sitting by a window or stepping outside for a few minutes, helps reinforce that same internal clock. Limiting caffeine in the afternoon and evening, and reducing bright screen exposure in the hour or so before bed are both commonly recommended because they can interfere with your body's natural signal to wind down. None of this requires anything expensive or complicated. It simply requires a bit of consistency and intention, treating your sleep with the same respect you would give any other important part of your health routine. Now let's talk briefly about nutrition, because what you eat provides the raw materials your brain needs to do all of this important work. You do not need a complicated or restrictive diet to support your brain. Researchers who study nutrition and aging consistently point toward a pattern of eating, rather than any single miracle food. This pattern tends to include plenty of colorful vegetables and fruits, particularly leafy greens and berries, which contain compounds that have been studied for their potential to support brain tissue over time. It tends to include healthy fats, such as those found in olive oil, walnuts, and fatty fish, which are often discussed in relation to heart and brain health together. Since a healthy heart supports strong, steady blood flow to the brain, it tends to include whole grains and legumes for steady, balanced energy throughout the day, rather than the sharp spikes and crashes that come from a lot of heavily processed and sugary foods. And staying well hydrated throughout the day matters more than people realize, since even mild dehydration has been associated with feeling foggy, tired, and less mentally sharp. None of this requires giving up joy at the table. It is simply about leaning most of the time toward foods that nourish rather than deplete you. So let's bring this all together, because I promised you an answer to the question we opened with. Which single activity boosts your aging brain the most? Based on what researchers who study cognitive aging keep finding, the answer is not one isolated habit, but it does have a clear champion, and that champion is engaging, novel learning that involves movement and social connection together. Think of it as the combination platter for your brain, rather than a single ingredient. A weekly dance class, a beginner language group, a hands-on hobby class with other people. These types of activities appear to outperform passive habits like watching television or even doing the same familiar puzzle every day, because they simultaneously challenge your memory, your coordination, your senses, and your relationships all at once. Layer good sleep and steady, real food nutrition underneath that, and you are giving your brain nearly everything the current research suggests it needs to stay sharp, adaptable, and resilient for years to come. Let's go back to Carol one more time. Once she understood this pattern, she did not overhaul her entire life overnight, and I do not want you to feel like you need to either. She simply signed up for one beginner watercolor painting class at her local community center, something brand new to her, done with a small group of people her age once a week. She kept up her regular walks, but she started inviting a friend along a couple of times a week instead of always walking alone. She set a consistent bedtime and started stepping outside with her coffee each morning instead of checking her phone first thing. Small changes layered together consistently over weeks and months. She told her daughter that within a couple of months, those foggy mornings became far less frequent, and she felt more like herself again, present, clear, and engaged with her days. I want you to hear this clearly before we wrap up. Your brain is not simply declining on a fixed schedule that you have no say in. It is responding every single day to how you move it, challenge it, connect it, feed it, and rest it. You do not need to become a different person or overhaul your entire life this week. Pick one small doable step. Maybe it is signing up for that class you have been curious about. Maybe it is calling a friend today instead of just texting. Maybe it is committing to a consistent bedtime for the next 2 weeks. Small, real, sustainable steps stacked over time are exactly what the research on healthy aging keeps pointing toward as the path that actually works. If this video gave you something useful today, I would love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments which habit you are going to try first. The movement, the learning, the connection, or the sleep. Because I read every single comment and it genuinely helps me know what to cover next for you. If you know someone, a parent, a sibling, a friend, who could use a little encouragement and a clear, simple plan for their own brain health, please share this video with them. It might mean more to them than you realize. And if you found this helpful, consider subscribing, because I share videos just like this one every week, focused entirely on helping you stay sharp, active, independent, and full of energy in the years ahead. You have far more influence over how your mind ages than most people ever realize. And I truly believe your best, clearest, most vibrant days are still ahead of you. Take care of that wonderful brain of yours, and I will see you in the next video.